Hello everyone, so in this video we're going to talk about the next lunation, which is going to be our second new moon in Aries that we've had this year, and it's also a solar eclipse, so it's starting off eclipse season. I misspoke in the last video and I said that the full moon in Libra was a lunar eclipse. It's not. This upcoming new moon in Aries again is going to be our first. It's going to kick off eclipse season, and as you may have noticed, we have already had a new moon in Aries. It was on March 21st, was the first one that occurred at 0 degrees of Aries, and this one is going to be at the anaretic degree, the last degree, 29 of Aries. And this lunation is really interesting. It feels like when I was looking at the chart, and I have some notes here, and I also pulled some tarot cards, which I'll get into later. But I'm just going to kind of talk about some of the main themes that I kind of see maybe emerging around this new moon based off of course, the chart. And just the energetics are very interesting and could be quite shocking, like some pretty loud, obvious events in the public sphere and just general society in the news. Around political figures and around maybe major like high profile legal cases or social protest, which I'll talk more about later. And also just in our lives, maybe look to the house that Aries rules in your chart and you could just see some pretty shocking developments happening. With eclipses, a lot of times a key word is like new beginnings and new endings. So pretty swift things coming in and things being eclipsed or cut out pretty quickly. And this is kind of amplified by the fact that this lunation chart has a Scorpio rising ascendant, which means that the chart ruler is going to be Mars again. And this is really interesting because the last lunation, the full moon in Libra, which was on the 5th of April, and I forgot to mention, this new moon is the 19th of April. And so the last full moon also had a Scorpio rising chart. And so we're really kind of working at the moment with this Mars and Cancer placement in the 9th house. And so something that I kind of see as, this really amplifying the kind of eclipse quality of cutting ties, maybe intentionally, and sometimes kind of just things just dropping out of our lives and kind of having to take on maybe new responsibilities because someone who previously did it is just kind of eclipsed out of the picture. That could sound really scary. Not dying necessarily, but just kind of swift transfers of power is something that I saw. And so kind of backtracking a little bit. So the chart ruler is Mars in Cancer in the 9th house, and some keywords that I kind of see around this placement is ideas around like brotherhoods, fraternities, loyalties to blood ties, kind of issues of where family kind of becomes dogmatic, or there's some sort of religion around nationalism kind of based, like ties and allegiances, alliances that are based on kind of clannishness, tribalism, kind of factions splitting off, and kind of questions about like who are we loyal to and why, and is there some sort of baggage associated with those kind of loyalties and family secrets potentially kind of coming out or wanting to like speak on them and not remain silent. And again, Mars in Cancer is trining Saturn in Pisces. So I kind of see this as, this is a pretty productive time, not in the traditional kind of like work sense of productivity, especially because both malefics, Mars and Saturn, are in water signs right now. I see this as a pretty productive time for like agitating in a really creative way, like kind of protest through film or kind of the arts. Kind of the vision that I have is kind of like this big youth movement for some reason, with Aries kind of this like younger, but Jupiter is present in Aries too, so this like kind of wise youth energy kind of coming in and trying to have some sort of transfer of power, or kind of this like demanding a voice, some sort of protest, kind of breaks from tradition, the avant-garde versus kind of like older, more established kind of sources of power. And so, yeah, just kind of this like this wave of energy kind of coming up. And additionally, Mars, again, the chart ruler is, I think it's a sextile. Let me check. Yes, it's sextiling Uranus and Mercury, which are conjunct at the time of this lunation. And this kind of speaks to this like manifesto energy coming out, or this like kind of shocking declaration, kind of someone, it's on the descendant. So encountering people like saying very shocking proclamations, kind of this like investigative journalism energy with Venus and Gemini in the 8th house, like things again coming to light. I think I say this a lot in a lot of the videos, but it is the case that for a lot of lunations, especially full moons, but also eclipses, that there's just like some big upset or pretty big things that are hard to ignore. There is sort of this energy of, and this is the big one that I'm going to mention, is the lunation. So the sun and the moon are conjunct at 29 Aries. They're squaring Pluto in Aquarius in the 4th house. This is kind of why I kind of spoke to the idea of like the old versus the young. Renovation is happening like at the root level of our beings. And again, kind of challenging issues around like ancestry, ideology, connecting us to family and to the past. And are we ready to break out of it? Do we know enough to move forward? This kind of underlying, like, I want to shake this thing, but like it's a big, there's a lot of death signatures, I will say, of things dying so that something new can be born, as always, I guess. Yeah, and so I will say, and I'll just talk about some of the cards that I pulled. There is this energy around some sort of like legal, again, struggle, or like high profile Supreme Court type issues around people kind of being like making a stand and basically communicating that like we're not content to live, like things could be different, and this kind of issue of justice. And the reason I say this is, you know, the 5 of Pentacles, we see this kind of this person who appears very charitable, and he's kind of like holding this, balancing the scales, which is interesting because Libra, the sign of the scales, is in the 12th house in this chart. So kind of this like shadowy kind of, the 12th house is kind of said to be the house of self-undoing, but it also can be kind of shadowy or unconscious aspects at play. And so kind of like this person who, in this case with Pluto at 0 Aquarius, I kind of read as like the state. It's like the government, the state, like looking very charitable and kind of like, look at this pat on the back like thing that we're doing that's so kind, but it's not really changing the conditions of poverty that are leaving these 2 people at the bottom to kind of need to receive this, or to rely upon this one person to get their basic needs met. And so kind of, again, these like youth movements. Let's see, yeah, we'll say with the 5 of Cups and the 9 of Cups reversed, again, this kind of powerful water placements of Mars and Saturn, of kind of like standing up and being like, things could be different, this kind of agitation or unrest leading to productive change, of like not wanting to really wallow in things anymore, this kind of like needing to turn over a new leaf, and kind of this like feeling of powerlessness leading to mobilization and to kind of not tolerating that anymore, actually, of and again, you kind of see this like very satisfied person crossing their arms, having all these cups behind them, this kind of contentment, but in the reverse position, kind of again with the Plutonian power themes about, you know, power and transfers of power, kind of like we aren't content to have this huge gross stratification of resources and wealth. So the 2 of Wands upright also came up, which kind of speaks to, you know, the poster child, new moon in Aries kind of energy. You see this figure kind of holding a globe and looking out over this landscape of like surveying something. And so after there's been this maybe crumbling of some sort, the need to kind of get our bearings right and kind of find out on a direction. But there is a moderating influence because the Hanged Man also came up. So kind of the importance of maybe letting the dust settle around this full moon, especially because not full moon, new moon, because the lunation is happening pretty close to the descendant, and just it's angular on the chart. So kind of this could be a pretty not disorienting, not to use kind of fear-mongering language, but the importance of kind of letting the dust settle and maybe letting a few weeks unfold before we kind of start implementing changes. A lot of times there's the kind of saying that, new moons are this time for setting intentions. Around this one, I wouldn't say. If you feel called and that's in your practice and this feels right, totally do it. But we could have some pretty significant 180s or pretty shocking things or unexpected things, positive and negative, just things shifting. And so kind of with the Two of Cups, or not the Two of Cups, the Two of Wands, you see this kind of like planning stage. So we can be in the ideation, and also probably there will be some significant protest things, maybe. We'll have to see how that pans out. But kind of being in this liminal space, we're quite at the end of Aries where things are gestating, but we don't quite have physical evidence yet of things being real in some way. The Two of Swords reversed, again, this kind of need to like pick a side. We could be kind of caught between like, again, these pretty stratified, like old versus young, political, social groups, and kind of needing to pick. And the last card that came up was the Queen of Wands. So again, this kind of fresh, young energy, kind of that's very confident in itself, that's matured. And so you might notice like what in your life, what confidence has been slowly growing over the past weeks since the first new moon in Aries, and maybe even longer, of like you're ready to stand on your own 2 feet, you're ready to assert something, and kind of this young, youthful, optimistic quality of like rage at how power has been used historically and even presently, and also just kind of like this young energy coming in is the best way that I can put it. So yeah, I think, wow, with the pretty strong Plutonian signature of this new moon, I think a lot of the changes are gonna start moving us on a trajectory that's gonna have pretty long lasting consequences, or some sustained root level renovation and questioning, and yeah. And so I think that's all I had to say. Let me know if what kind of themes or dynamics you guys have been noticing since the full moon in Libra. That seems like a pretty loud one for me. I feel like a lot of stuff was coming up. So feel free to comment down below, and if you'd like to book a natal chart reading, all the information to do that will be in the description box below. So have a lovely day.